Coming up on this edition of McKnight Tonight, do we really need to worry about recreational drugs in sport? Queensland looks to ban smacking, but will that just lead to more youth crime? Why one Australian state is placing a ban on ham sandwiches, and yes, I'm serious. Plus TV and radio host Sofie Formica. She'll be my special guest.
McKnight Tonight. McKnight Tonight.
No, wrong again.
McKnight Tonight. McKnight Tonight.
I've seen that since university.
Funny insightful interviews from a watchdog to some bag. McKnight Tonight. McKnight Tonight. Here comes McKnight Tonight.
Hello and welcome to another edition of McKnight Tonight. It is so good to have your company. Thanks for joining us. Today, May 17, is World Whiskey Day. I just happen to have one right here. Did you know the word whiskey actually means water of life? Yeah. This is because it comes from a Gaelic word that reads Usage Beef. I'm sure I've said that correctly. I'll keep that for during the show. Just hidden so people who are just joining us don't know. All right. Thank you. Don't forget, you can leave a comment at any time throughout the show. Let me know your thoughts on the topics we're discussing. Just put your comment in the comment section of this video and we'll read them out throughout the show and visit a fabulous place for our random live shot of the day. Okay, it's time to get to our hot topics. And this week, a survey was released by News Corp that was conducted with NRL player agents. These are the people who negotiate contracts between the players and the NRL teams. The survey revealed 62% of player agents said drug use was still a problem for the code. Any professional athlete that engages in illicit drug use is a problem for the NRL, whether it's 5 players or 50, said Penrith Grand Final hero Scott Sattler, who is now an accredited agent. The thing that comes to me when it comes to recreational drugs in sport is, why do we care? If it's performance enhancing, I totally get that. I totally understand that if you're using a performance enhancing drug, that's a problem. But when it comes to recreational drugs, what is the problem, especially when drug use is so rampant throughout our community? We just fool ourselves that cocaine and the like isn't used. And the other thing that gets me is half of the people reporting these stories in the media all use coke. I have seen a lot of coke use throughout my career by people in the industry. So anyone in the industry who gets hoity-toity and about it, come on, you've witnessed it. You've seen possibly your workmates, your friends use it. You'd have to be living in a rock in the Australian media to not have seen drug use at some point. Now, when I say we have to be realistic about drug use in our society, have a look at this. Australia is the 6th highest illicit drug consumption out of 28 countries. And how do they know this? Every year, they actually test our water sewage. So what they do is they test the sewage, and basically because when it goes in you, it comes out of you in some way. So they test for alcohol, marijuana, cocaine, methamphetamine, ketamine, all that kind of stuff. So they actually do have a good understanding of what people are using. And people are using coke, and they're using it in the suburbs. So the idea that these players aren't using coke in the off season, and there's a reason why the Players Union has demanded, there has been discussions about testing players in the off season, but that has been pushed back. And let's be honest, even the NRL knows dangerous territory because they would lose half the team, half the players in the game. So why not just, I'm not saying condone it. I'm just saying, let it go. Just, forget testing for it. Just let people do their own thing as long as it's not a performance enhancing. If they're taking it right before a game, that's a major problem. But if they're taking it out at the pub with their mates or having a few beers at home, I just don't care. And I know this is going to put me against a lot of people. And the people who come down, drug use, it's illegal, blah, 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 blah. But it's like smoking and the taxes that we talked about last week and the high taxes placed on smoking. You can say, well, you shouldn't be doing it, or you can accept the reality of the situation. People in this country use drugs. A lot of people in this country use drugs. We just have to be mature enough to accept the reality of the situation and determine how we're going to deal with it. If we're still going to be tut-tutting and we're going to make you go to jail and we're going to fine you, or if we're just going to say, you know what, if these people that use these drugs are harming others, completely different scenario. But the use of alcohol can end up harming other people because people get violent. So cocaine use, which again, and pot use, which again, I tell you is rampant. Maybe we just have to grow up and accept where we are in Australia and where we are in this country. Let me know your thoughts. Leave a comment in the comment section of this video, because I have a feeling I might be on my own on this one. I thought I might have a sip of the drink while it's there, because I have a feeling, as I said, a lot of you are going to disagree with me, and I might need a bit of Dutch courage for the torrent of abuse coming my way. Or maybe you agree with me. But the thing is, this is legal. This is my advice, but nice drop too on this World Whiskey Day. All right. There are calls to outlaw smacking, which is still legal in Australia. The issue is back in the headlines because the Queensland Law Reform Commission is undertaking a review of criminal defences in that state, and child safety advocates have raised the controversial tactic for review. I'll give you some background from this story on 7 News.
Whether it's been dished out to you or by you, attitudes continue to shift on smacking children.
Corporal punishment is actually not effective no matter how much you use it.
Outlawed in Sweden in 1978, in Australia it's legal and covered by a defence called domestic discipline. Only New South Wales bans hitting the head and neck.
If your boss punched you on the arm rather than in the head, would that be okay?
Now, with the Queensland Law Reform Commission reviewing criminal defences, child safety advocates want smacking banned.
Those defences do not exist for adults or for pets.
A lot of us don't actually end up smacking the kids much, but having the right to do it is the right to raise your kids however you want.
Experts say there are decades of research to show corporal punishment doesn't work, and 75% of Australians don't support it, even though 1 in 2 parents have done it.
Corporal punishment's just completely inappropriate in the 21st century.
There are assault laws in place, so I'm not telling parents how to provide discipline to their kids.
Instead of smacking, experts say parents should use a calm voice to get the attention of their child as soon as a problem comes up. Model the behaviour they want to see in their child and teach them what to do instead of what not to do.
So if we're wanting to change levels of violence and aggression, we need to start in the home.
Look, this is a serious issue, but when I see those kind of tips, I've got to be honest, I roll my eyes. You know, if we want to see less aggression, people have changed the way they parent. There is less smacking happening now, and look, I'm assuming there's less smacking happening now than there ever was before, because new generations have decided that's not the way they want to parent. They don't want to parent like their parents parented. And we have a youth crime crisis. So what's the line here? I certainly got smacked as a kid, and I'll be honest, I've been guilty of doing it when my kids were younger, and I will say it is a loss of control. I didn't do it often, but it happened occasionally, and it was probably mostly when there was a loss of control. And so that I accept that fact. When people say you've lost control when you resort to that, yep, I 100% agree. But it's usually at the end of a lot that has led up to that, isn't it? And I don't think we can be so hard to call these people criminals. Now, what is the line? There is a line. You can be charged with assault for assaulting your kids, even though smacking is allowed. But where in a society are we drawing that line? When I was younger, I got the wooden spoon. I remember I swore one time, and someone in my family was not happy about that and gave me the bar of soap. Literally, you know how people always say, "I'll wash your mouth out with soap." I got the soap in the mouth. Literally. Yeah, that was a fun day. I can't say it worked long term though, because I'm known as a bit of a swearer. But when we did have corporal punishment at school with the cane and everything like that, we did respect authority. You know, there's a lack of respect for teachers. There's a lack of respect for police. There's a lack of respect for parents. So what is the right way to go? I'm not advocating abuse here, but I don't think it's a simple solution to criminalise parents smacking a child on the bum. And that's where these advocates want to take it. You should not touch that child at all. But I think we, like everything in life, we need balance. So what is the right and wrong? And there will be people watching this who think they have the hard line, you should not touch a child. And there will be others who think, well, it didn't do me any harm. We always say that though, don't we? But did it do us harm? Would we have been different, more adjusted people, better adjusted people if we hadn't been smacked? You know, it's not often I sit on the fence of an issue, but I find myself going from one side to the other here. I will say that I don't want to see parents criminalised for hitting their child on the bum, because I think that goes too far. I think as adults, we all need to learn better ways, but those lessons there, model the behaviour you want. Well, isn't that what we do as parents? We try to model the behaviour we want from people. They look at us 24/7. They are modelling their behaviour on us, the good and the bad. And then they become their own people based on their own personality too. But when I see stock standard generic things of, you know, talk to them in a calm voice, okay, little Jimmy's running towards the road here, but I'll say, Jimmy, best not to play with the cars. No, sometimes you have to yell. Sometimes there are good reasons to yell. And sometimes, you know, sometimes parents think they need to hit their kids on the bum. That's what I mean by hit. I'm not advocating, you know, I'm not even advocating hitting. I'm just saying let's not turn them into criminals. And that's the balance we need. I just said to Amanda, we're doing Rob's Rant now, and she said, what's the difference? Well, it is time for Rob's Rant, and this week, government overreach and why they need to stop telling us how to live our lives. It comes off the back of this story in the Daily Mail, which revealed South Australia will ban ads on ham sandwiches on public transport. It's part of a bid to tackle childhood and adult obesity. The new rules will come into effect from July 1, banning items that are considered to be junk food. Processed ham falls into that category, according to the Daily Mail. Other items include lollies, chocolates, desserts, soft drinks, chips, ice creams and other confectionery products. But now the South Australian government has tried to pour cold water on the claims about ham sandwiches, but they seem to have done so in a very non-committal way. Have a look at this ABC News Breakfast interview.
This is absolute baloney, and the advertising agency lobbyists don't like it. They want to force us to put junk food ads on our own buses, which is extraordinary. And so they're coming up with all sorts of clickbaity ideas to say that this would be a bad idea. We've been very clear. We want to be reasonable. We want to have a common sense approach to this. We'll look at any ad that people want to put up. I'm not sure that anyone actually advertises ham and salad sandwiches, but if they were to, then they'd be welcome to submit it and we'd work with them.
It's interesting, isn't he? He says it's baloney, but then doesn't deny that processed ham would have to be a discussion. So I call his comments baloney. But this is the problem. Look, it's the SA government. They have the right to say they're going to ban junk food advertising. But again, we're not letting people make their own choices. We don't live in a dictatorship. We, as consumers, are allowed to know what products are out there and make a choice. And I come back to it. He did not deny that ham sandwiches, processed ham, would not be banned. Let's have a look at that again.
We've been very clear. We want to be reasonable. We want to have a common sense approach to this. We'll look at any ad that people want to put up. I'm not sure that anyone actually advertises ham and salad sandwiches, but if they were to, then they'd be welcome to submit it and we'd work with them.
They'd be welcome to submit it and we'd work with them. That is not a definitive, yes, they can they can advertise processed ham. So just cut the BS. Be honest about it. And this argument that it's clickbaity, it's not if it's true. I hate that. It's an easy get out of jail free card, isn't it? Clickbait, clickbait, clickbait. Well, a couple of things. Every tweet from a company that you read on Twitter, or every post on Instagram, on TikTok, it's all clickbait. Every company wants you to click and go to their website. When I do a post for McKnight Tonight, I hope to God it's clickbait because I want you to come in and take a look. Maybe I'm not clickbaity enough. People will say to me, clickbait headline. Damn bloody right it is. What is wrong with clickbait? It's how we get enticed to watch something, to read something. This argument that clickbait's no good. This guy, this South Australian health minister, is using easy, lazy ways to try and get out of something without actually answering the question. If he wants to put his junk food ban in place, he can do that. He has the right to do that. He will have to be held accountable by the people. But when someone makes a claim that you can't advertise processed ham, don't call it baloney when it's not. Just own up and say, yep, you can't. At least then we know where we stand.
It's the Random Life Shot of the Day. Where are you going today? You'll never know where you'll end up with the Random Life Shot of the Day.
Yes, it's our Random Live Shot of the Day, and today we're heading to Bali for an underwater adventure. This is the view of the life on the reefs of the Karavastazis, I'm sure I've said that right, dive site in Bali Creek. Weather-wise, it's been a bit of an overcast day with a bit of sun poking through, hitting a high of 22 degrees after a low of 16. And, I can see a few fish there. Amanda, let's have a look on camera one if we can, please. A few fish floating through. There was some lovely fish before coming up. And we have had one little issue. I went to have a sip during the opener and I broke the glass of the whiskey. While I'm chatting to Sophie, Jasmine, maybe we could get a new whiskey. It'd be nice. There's a bit of glass down there, so I'll watch my feet. All right, let's get to some feedback coming through to McKnight Tonight. And Dylan says, have a whiskey for me, McKnight Tonight. Well, Dylan, that's a bit easier than said because it's sort of... the reason is I've got a little desk underneath here, and so I've got a little desk, and so it doesn't have much room, and I was sort of picking it up. I had a sip, put it down, and it went bang. Okay, sorry. Justine has some feedback. We already have limited choices. You can't get a full sugar drink in most, if not all, hospitals. I should be able to choose what I want to buy, eat, or drink. It's absolutely ridiculous. They don't know my eating habits, how much I exercise, or if that full-strength Coke is managing sugar levels. If they minded their own business and let people decide what's right for them. Oh, Justine, you're speaking my language. I couldn't agree more. Over the page, we've got Jason Turner saying, meanwhile, lunch and sausage is good. What does that mean? I don't know. I don't know what that means. You'll have to explain that one a bit more, Jason. Dylan says, random live shot of the day. Yay, my favourite segment. Brilliant, Dylan. Thank you very much. We've also got Jeanette. Hello, Jeanette. Yes, please, whiskey with ice. Yeah, well, I'm going to have to try and get another one, Jeanette. It makes me very sad that I've done that. But I tell you what does make me happy. My next guest. Well, my next guest rose to fame as a host on Wombat and Saturday Disney and became a staple of Aussie TV, hosting shows like Just Kidding. After turning to acting on shows like Home and Away, she then had a very successful career before returning to our shores, where she is now the host of 4BC Afternoons. And I've barely scratched the surface. Sofie Formica, welcome to McKnight Tonight.
Hi, thank you.
It is so good to have you here. Obviously, you and I got to know each other when I was the executive producer of Afternoons with Sofie Formica on 4BC. But, geez, you've certainly had a career where you are now and where you started, when you think about the journey you've taken, what goes through your mind?
Some of it seems a little bit surreal, but you talk about those shows that I did, especially in the late 80s and the early 90s, and it just was like a snowball. One thing kind of followed from the other. And so many times I've wondered what would have happened if I had never left Australia and I had stayed here and kept working in TV. What would that have looked like, as opposed to the road which I ended up taking, was to go over to the US and to have that life experience. And I'm not regretting it, and I would never, ever, ever want to change a thing. But I do wonder sometimes, if I had stayed, because of all of the TV I had made at that time, what might have been.
Well, you were a household name. And as I said, we got to know you on Saturday Disney, and I've actually got the very first cast photo of Saturday Disney. When you see something like that and a young Sofie Formica, what do you think?
Yeah, I still had baby fat. Look at my face. I was a little girl in so many ways, but I was always really clear about wanting a career in television. And just the other day, I was talking to a young person about sort of life and careers and journeys and purpose. And I can remember being at high school and knowing that I wanted to work on television, and basically being told by my teachers and career counsellors that the chances of that ever happening for you are really slim. So maybe you should get some secretarial skills or have something else to fall back on, because let's just say me in high school were not a match made in heaven. I certainly didn't exceed academically, but I was really clear about wanting to try and give TV a crack. And I was so lucky that the first year that I was out of high school, Wombat was still on. And at the time, it was the kids' TV show. And as you remember, Rob, there was a time when all of the networks were required to make a certain amount of Australian television and a certain amount of Australian television for kids. And that was the show to be on. And I was in the first year out of high school. I had started working on Wombat. I did a massive trip to Africa for them and did all of this filming, and it was going to be my foray into kids TV. And literally I got home and the show was axed. And I was like, great, I've just had the shortest career in TV history. And I had lied. I lied to my mum. I said to Mum, I'm gonna defer from uni, because at that point I'd started university. And I was like, I'll just defer, and if I have to, I'll go back. And I didn't. I dropped out. So I was like, shit, I don't have a job. I can't go back to uni. What am I going to do? And then literally within a couple of months of Wombat being axed, Buena Vista Television, or Buena Vista International, which was the TV arm of Disney, did the deal with the Seven Network for Saturday Disney coming to Australia. So I was actually the very first host put onto the show. And we were also producers, so we were hosts of the show, but we also worked very much on the production of the program. And then the audition process began with me to then hire James Sherry and Janine Mapp as the other two original, the OGs.
I didn't know you hired them.
Saturday Disney. Well, I was with them for the audition process. So they auditioned with me. From memory, James was chosen first, and then the audition process happened for the third, and Janine was younger than the two of us, and she came on as the third, and rest her soul, she passed away recently, which is just incredibly sad. But I guess in some ways that's a reminder to me of just how long ago it was too, but she was way too young to lose her life, that's for sure.
Oh, well, she certainly died young. There's no doubt about that. Yeah. It's interesting what you say about your guidance counsellor, because they're right that, TV and trying to get into that industry is very difficult. But you were Eddie Everywhere before Eddie Everywhere was a thing. You were hosting a lot of shows, especially with Stevie Jacobs, like Just Kidding. You were the go-to host, but then you made this extraordinary decision to drop Australia and go to LA. Why?
Yeah, good question. Actually, I'd worked a bunch for Seven and the Seven Network, and then the opportunity came to jump ship, go to Nine and do Just Kidding with Stephen Jacobs, which was at the time one of the highest rating, or the highest rating show in the country. I think we were one of the first shows to crack the 2 million mark, which back then was massive. And he and I...
it's still massive, Sofie.
Yeah, that's true. And he and I, there's no disputing, there was a really fabulous chemistry on camera. But to be honest, it just wasn't it wasn't the show that, you know, lit the fire in me. It wasn't what I wanted to do in terms of opportunity to kind of, you know, add skills to the repertoire. And at the time, I had an agent in LA, William Morris, and he kind of said,
big agency.
Yeah, big agency, and he sort of said he believed in me, and he's like, I think you'll work over here. And you've got to remember, I mean, it's really hard when you talk. This is really the olden days. You're talking 1993, 94 at this point, and there were no Australians in Los Angeles. There were no Australians on television. There were very few actors at that time. And so I just thought, yeah, why not? If I don't give it a crack now, I never will. And as it turned out, NBC Time Telepictures had just started the process of Extra, the entertainment magazine. So I actually got the job as a reporter on Extra before I even left Australia. And the very first interview I did was with Pamela Anderson. She came out to Australia. I can't even remember what for. It may have even just been a Baywatch promo. And I can remember the very first story I filed for Extra was on the beach at Bondi with Pamela Anderson, and then I flew to the States. And then, you know, and then again, you're talking 90s. It was before mobile phones. We were still using pages to try and get in touch with anybody. And so I landed in LA, and then I became this roving reporter, and I would go and do all of the movie junkets for Extra. And I would have to do a pseudo-American accent because they weren't used to having Australians on TV. So it was like a little bit Australian and a little bit American. So a little bit of American in my mouth. And, yeah, and then it kind of took off for everybody. Like, maybe I helped a little bit.
Well, you certainly did. But it's one of those things, to go back to the poor old guidance counsellor, you wouldn't have ended up presenting with Oprah Winfrey if you had followed their advice. There you are with Oprah. Now, what I love about this, Sofie Formica, and look, you and I are friends, and I will take the piss out of you from time to time, but there you are in that shot. You're presenting a technology segment, aren't you?
I was actually not just a segment. I was presenting TV shows about what was happening in the world of the internet. 2 of them.
And I am going to tell the people watching this, Sofie Formica is a Luddite when it comes to technology. She hasn't got a clue.
I don't think Luddite
is that unfair?
That's unfair. I think that I know what I need to know, Rob, and no more. Like,
yes, you were able to read a script. That's what you were able to do, and do it very well and very naturally.
Well, she chose me to teach her how to get online. There was a series called Oprah Goes Online, and it was for the Oxygen Network. When she had just bought the Oxygen Network, it was one of the first series that they did. And basically it was Oprah and her best friend, Gayle King, and me and a guy called Omar Wasso, who at the time was working for CNBC out of New York. And so we were hosting this show alongside them as their guides, as Oprah had her first experiences going online and, you know, buying stuff and understanding what e-commerce looked like and how the internet was going to change everything. And my favorite part about that experience was, well, 2 things actually. One, I have never ever looked as good ever in front of a camera because the lighting for anything to do with Oprah is like sky's the limit. And so it was like working inside a cloud. There was no shadows anywhere. It was like the light came from under us, from beside us, from above us. It was like literally being in heaven. So, that was a tick. And the other thing was, like, I spent an entire day with Jeff Bezos in the green room because he was there. At the time, they were kind of going from selling just books, because remember when Amazon first started, it was an online book retailer. And this is 1999 when that happened. So I had worked in San Francisco. I went over to the States in 94, worked out of LA, moved to San Fran, was making these TV shows with CNET. And then that opportunity came up to work with Oprah. So it was October of 1999 when we had this, experience together. And I remember thinking to Jeff Bezos about Mum, like, you two, everybody thinks they're going to make money out of the internet. If only I'd just kicked him a couple of bucks.
He did. And just imagine if you had stayed in LA, maybe you could have been part of that all-female crew that went into space. But You don't want to do that.
No, I don't. I have no desire.
Oh, I'd love
No.
to.
No.
Of course, everyone would want to know, what was Oprah like?
Yes.
She was at the height of her powers. You know, she was the darling of television. What was she like?
Look, it was an amazing experience for me to have been chosen to go and do it. But it was also a really hard job to do. She wields an immense amount of power, and it was really the first time that I understood what that being in that environment felt like. You know, everybody was really, other than those that were in her inner circle, you know, almost petrified of just not wanting to make a mistake. Everybody was very keen to please her and to make sure that it was exactly what she wanted all the time. And so that meant that there was a level of tension. And I think at the time she was going through a no carbs kind of phase. So, you know.
Is that level of tension good or bad for a set?
I guess, you know, not necessarily ascribing it to her, but I think that extreme power can always wield with it some negativity, put it that way. You know, I think that it means that it's less collaborative and more dictatorial, you know, where everyone's trying to guess what the person who ultimately is making all the decisions is going to say. But, you know, as I said, it's not necessarily about the experience with her. I think that's across the board. I just remember finishing the experience and thinking to myself, I never want to meet Martha Stewart, because I held her in the same kind of esteem. And then I realised actually when you're there and I thought that it would be a lot warmer and fuzzier as an experience, because I loved the show and I loved Oprah as a talk show host and the warmth that she would exude always. And I thought that would be what it would be like on the set, and it just wasn't.
Interesting. But you certainly led the life when you were living over there. I mean, you became friends with Kylie Minogue and you went partying with her all the time. I've got you. Now, I don't know who's in the middle there.
Oh, that's Alistair McDougall. So he was an actor in Australia as well. Look, there were a whole bunch of us. Like I said, you know, you've got to remember this is the 90s, and Kylie went over and she was doing a movie with Pauly Shore. I can't remember. It was like a
Biodome
type of thing. Biodome? Okay, there you go. I knew you'd know. And so there were so few of us that everyone would kind of gravitate to one another. I remember, you know, it was when Russell came over and did LA Confidential.
Russell
we
Crowe.
all work out same gym, Julian McMahon. There was just, you know, those of us who were kind of there in the 90s were the little posse. And then that posse over time grew and then became what it is now, whereas there are Australians everywhere and so many of them are working and are really well respected in the industry over there because we're good.
Yeah. But it was such a small group of Aussies. I understand how you all banded together, and that photo with Kylie isn't a one-off. You spent a lot of time with her and the other Australians. Yeah. What was it like?
Yeah, it was fun. It was fun because no one else really knew who you were. You know, it's not like she would walk down the street there and people would know her the way that they know her here. So I think that even
she wasn't as big then.
No, and you know, I know that she's worked really hard to have a following in the States, and you know, probably to a lesser degree than the way she's known certainly here and in the UK. But I'm sure for her it was fun to have a bit of anonymity, you know, be able to go out and party. There was one night I can remember we were maybe the Mondrian, and Mick Hucknall from Simply Red was there, and I was a massive Simply Red fan, and that was a fun night. We had a good time.
Yeah, and I have a feeling that's where you're going to leave that story. You did acting, you did presenting. I mean, one of your classic appearances was on Murder, She Wrote, and working with, you know, I'm saying Jessica Fletcher, the character's name, but
Angela Lansbury.
Yeah, how amazing was that? And especially this next shot we've got of you on Murder, She Wrote, where you're getting this is crazy because it was an episode of Murder, She Wrote set in Australia, filmed in Hollywood, but actually filmed on Wild West sets.
Yeah,
but they brought in a few Australian animals.
With a wallaby, with a real live wallaby. it was really weird because honestly, Rob, I had to make a really quick decision. So, you know, I land over in LA. It's 1994. In between that, I got married because Scott and I went over there together when we were dating, and we went, yeah, let's make a crack of this. So we decided to come home. We got married, like we had a 6-week engagement. We went back over to Los Angeles. It's 1995 at this point because we got married New Year's Eve 94. And I went to work for Extra. And in that 1 year, I kind of dipped my toe in the water of trying to see if I could get some acting work over there. I hadn't really done a lot in Australia. I'd sort of, you know, had an arc on Home and Away, which I really enjoyed. But very quickly it became apparent that I could not do both. I either had to pursue the TV presenting road or keep plugging away and going to audition after audition and try to see whether or not I could get more acting work. And the reality just came to a real quick head because I was offered this job in San Francisco, which was a salaried contract with a internet company that was doing both television production about the pop culture of the internet. So not necessarily, you know, how many RAM and what the computing parts of the software were or whatever, but it was more about the pop culture of the internet and how it was going to change the world. Or I pursued trying to keep acting, and you know, and there. At the end of the day, financially, it was a no-brainer. I couldn't say no to the opportunity of A, moving to San Francisco, which was really exciting, and getting out of LA, and B, knowing that I'd have a regular paycheck week after week, month after month, and what ended up being year after year. And that was really extraordinary for me. When I first started on a show called The Web, it was like me and 2 guys. By the second season, one of them was gone, and by the third season, it was just me by myself. So I ended up hosting a show called The Web for the USA and Sci-Fi channels.
Which is, again, extraordinary.
Yeah, I know. And then I did another show called TV.com with Ron Reagan Jr., which was more news style. And then the sister show to that was another show which was kind of like a Beyond 2000 called The New Edge, that was hosted by Ryan Seacrest. He used to fly up from LA because he was, you know, doing his thing on radio. And Ryan would fly up to San Francisco, shoot the raps for The New Edge, and then fly back to LA again. You know, he actually did okay in life.
Yeah, he did.
And I moved back to, you know, I kind of worked. I did the Oprah job. Now it's 1999. Literally, I did the job with Oprah, and then I fell pregnant with twins, and that was time to come home.
And do you ever regret coming back to Australia?
I don't, from a life perspective, because my kids, you know, meant that they knew what it was like to grow up in Australia and around family, and I don't think that there's anything that can replace that. I honestly thought that maybe after a few years back in Brisbane, we would end up in Sydney, or, you know, potentially go away. But, you know, life ends up taking over and becoming more important than work. And I never in a million years thought that 25 years later I'd still be living in Brisbane, and here we are.
Well, you eventually ended up making the transition to radio. You are the host of 4BC Afternoons with Sofie Formica. Yeah. How did you find the transition to radio?
Yeah, it was really unexpected. When my youngest daughter turned 6, I went back to work. So I'd taken a good few years away from working completely. And then I went back to Channel 7, and for years I hosted the travel programs in Queensland, which was perfect when you're raising a family and you're a mum and you're trying to be all things to all people. And then just before COVID, I left 7 for a variety of reasons and was really working on what would happen next. And I was really hoping I could get another travel program up. I wanted to, and I still do, love the idea of doing something that's in that sort of ecotourism space. And COVID happened. And then I didn't really think that radio was going to happen. I thought I'd be good at filling in, but I never thought that it would be a full-time job for me. And then just one thing led to another, and Nine bought the radio stations, including 4BC in Brisbane. So it sits under the Nine umbrella, as you know. And, a lot of the skills transfer. And again, it's a bit like CNET, how lovely it is to have a regular job and, a salary and not have to be hustling for work.
Well, of course, that's where we met, because I was the executive producer of Afternoons and joined as you joined, basically. And one of the funniest things was we had a TV mentality, whether it be the rundowns and people in the building at 4BC were scratching their head because we worked very differently to the way other executive producers in radio worked with their on-air presenters, didn't we? Had a unique relationship.
It's true, and you're absolutely right. And I think it's because you come to it from having the way that you sort of think about putting something together and producing something. And every now and then I still have to remind myself there are no pictures, it's just words. How do you tell a story when you've got no pictures? You're just using words. And you were so great in helping me with that transition and in the storytelling and also in just elevating the production of the show. It's been a bumpy road for a variety of reasons, but I've kind of, I think for me, I've settled into realising that I can't control everything all the time, and all I can really work on is my little patch and how I present that and how I try to remain as authentic and true to who I am while I do that show. And I kind of like that I'm staying in that 12 to 3 time slot because it gives me a bit more scope to be able to do a lot more of the sort of magazine style lifestyle as well as the news and current affairs. But it just sort of broadens, I think, the scope of how long interviews can be even. And that was one of the things that, I liked the most about doing that. So, here I am plugging away week after week, and hopefully we'll grow the audience and, happy days.
Well, you certainly do love a chat. I mean, I don't usually do 23-minute interviews on McKnight tonight, but I can't help myself with you. You do great on the radio. I think you could do any slot. I think you could do breakfast, mornings, drive. You certainly sound great in afternoons. You won an ACRA as Best New Talent.
That was hilarious.
Well, that was a great night. We went to the ACRAs together.
Only one of us took our shoes off at the end of the night, and it wasn't me.
You'll never forgive me for it, will you? Because I had bought new shoes. My feet were so sore. I was in pain. And as we walked to the after party, I just took them off. And we snuck into someone else's after party.
Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you're bleeding from the feet, Rob. You don't take your shoes off. It's just
I'm not a woman. I don't have a high pain threshold.
But the ACRA thing was really unexpected and really lovely because, people were like, I remember actually it was Marty Sheargold made a comment about it afterwards because one of the other people who was up against me in that category worked on his team, because we're talking about Best New Talent. And he's like, well, she's certainly not new to the planet. And that's true. I was 50 years old when I won that award. And, the reality is I had not worked in radio. So I was a newcomer to radio. Like I wasn't a newcomer to media, but I'd never worked in the radio genre before. And I think it gave me an incredible amount of, self-belief and also brave enough now to even think about what other challenges I'd take on. It was unexpected to do radio, super unexpected to win an award like that, to recognise that, I had done well in my sort of first year on air. And then I'm like, if you're a 50-year-old woman and you think you want to change directions, freaking go for it.
Absolutely.
I think we're so quick to put ourselves into boxes, and I'd like to think that, in some small way, it reminds everybody to give it a crack. What's the worst thing that can happen?
And on that note, Sofie, a good note to wrap it up. We can find you every weekday afternoon on 4BC from 12 to 3 p.m. It is a great show. I miss it dearly. I miss working with you. It was we had such fun together, and I wish you nothing but the best. Thanks for joining us on McKnight tonight.
Thank you, Rob. Always a pleasure.
Oh, she's pretty good, isn't she? Look, I've got 2 pieces that have just come through to me. One is Jeanette. Jeanette, thank you so much. I've been told that I've got a note here saying you bought me a coffee. You've donated $25. Thank you so much. I know you're on a very fixed income, so I really appreciate it. It's your way of showing how much you appreciate what we do here at McKnight Tonight. So I genuinely means the world to me. Look, we don't ask for much, and anything that goes through buymeacoffee.com/McKnight Tonight certainly isn't covering the costs, but it just is a nice way of showing that you like what we do. So thank you very, very much, Jeanette. The second thing is I've got a notification from 6 News here saying One Nation SA MP Sarah Game quits party to sit as an independent. I've got to say, I hate this. If you are elected to a party, you either need to serve with that party or you need to resign. Not just resign from the party, but resign from Parliament and stand in a by-election under your own name. People, you know what you're getting into, right? And you are elected with the help of that party. There are people who voted for Sarah Game, who I've never heard of before now, but there are people who voted for Sarah Game because she was part of One Nation. And there are people who have voted for politicians on Labor and Liberal and the Nationals. And so when they leave that party, it is a betrayal. If you want to be elected under your own volition, sure, go ahead. Get your name out there and be voted as an independent. But when you get voted as a party and then leave, I hate it. I don't think you should be allowed. I think you should actually have to force a new election and stand again. My thoughts. Something to end on this Saturday night. All right, let's get to some feedback coming through to McKnight Tonight. And Dylan says, hopefully Rob has a new whiskey. Well, Dylan, oh my God, Jasmine is here. Hello. She put this on my table during the Sofie interview. Thank you so much, Jasmine. I really appreciate that. I do have to be honest. It's pretty dangerous down here at the moment because I may not be wearing shoes tonight, and there is broken glass down here at the table because of my little accident before. So, but everything's okay. It's Big Shard, so I'm missing it. Oh, Amanda's hurrying me along. Jason says, you haven't heard of lunch and sausage? No, Jason, I haven't. That mystery meat concoction in the supermarket deli section, shrink wrapped and tied at each end. Oh, yes, I know what you're talking about now. Okay, Jason, sorry. You just threw me. All right, Ash says, such a great interview with Sofie. Loving tonight's ep. Thank you, Ash, watching us on YouTube. I've got to be honest. Not many people watch us live on YouTube. People catch up, but Facebook is where most people watch us. So, Ash, I appreciate you watching us. Let's go over the page. Gavin says, lighting department represents the Holy Grail. Are you trying to tell me, Gavin, that... Oh, he was talking about the Sofie interview with Oprah. Gavin is one of the best lighting directors you'll ever meet, and maybe I need to get him here at the McKnight Tonight studios to give me a little bit of lighting. Jeanette says, I agree. She has an amazing career. Well, thank you, Jeanette. Really appreciate that. I have to say that when I put my foot up just then, the look I got from Amanda and Jasmine was, stop now. They did not like that at all. All right, I'm getting the wind up. Thank you for your company tonight. We'll be back again next week at 8 o'clock. I hope you've had a good Saturday. Thank you for sharing it with us, and share this video with your friends. Get them on the McKnight Tonight bandwagon. Appreciate your time. We'll see you next week. And the reason I'm looking down is so I can do this on McKnight Tonight. Good night, everybody.
Tonight. It's good.